The crowd gasped as Mary, a 72-year-old grandma, sprinted past the finish line, her silver hair flying behind her like a banner of victory. The stadium shook with cheers, phones flashed, and the announcer shouted in disbelief, "Unbelievable! She has done it! At 72 years old, she has broken the record." Everyone had said she was too old. They laughed when she first signed up, shaking their heads as if she was foolish. Some even whispered cruel things. "She'll collapse before the race even starts. What is she thinking, embarrassing herself like this?" But now, as she raised her wrinkled hands high into the air, tears in her eyes, Mary proved them all wrong. The judges rushed to confirm the record, while a reporter shoved a microphone toward her, yelling, "Mary, how did you do it? At your age, nobody expected this." But before she could answer, something happened. Something that no one in the stadium could have ever imagined. And that is where her story really begins. Mary had not always been this strong. In fact, just a year before this day, she was sitting alone in her small kitchen, staring at her weak hands as they trembled over a teacup. Her life seemed quiet, almost too quiet. The days felt the same: morning tea, a little gardening, and sometimes staring out of the window at children playing on the street. Deep inside, she felt forgotten. Her children were busy with their own lives, and her friends were either too sick or too far away. One evening, her granddaughter Lily came to visit. Lily was a bright 12-year-old girl, full of energy. She hugged Mary tightly and said, "Grandma, our school is holding a charity race next month. Parents and grandparents can join too. Will you come and run with me?" Mary smiled sadly. "Oh, darling, I'm too old for running now. My knees would laugh at me if I tried." But Lily's eyes sparkled. "Grandma, you always tell me never to give up. You say we can do anything if we try. Are you giving up now?" The words cut deep. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Lily's voice. "Are you giving up now?" She thought of her younger days, when she used to be the fastest runner in her school. She remembered how alive she felt when her feet hit the ground and the wind rushed past her face. Could she do it again? Or was everyone right? Was she really too old? The next morning, she made a decision. She put on her old sneakers, laced them up slowly, and stepped outside. Her legs trembled, but she whispered to herself, "One step at a time." She jogged down the street, her neighbors staring at her with raised eyebrows. By the time she got home, her heart was racing, her chest hurt, and sweat poured down her forehead. She collapsed onto a chair, exhausted. But instead of feeling defeated, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Days turned into weeks. Mary trained every morning. She started slow, walking, then jogging, then running. Some neighbors mocked her. One man laughed and said, "Mrs. Mary, are you training for the Olympics? Don't break your bones before Christmas." Others shook their heads in disbelief. But there were also moments of encouragement. Lily cheered her on every weekend, clapping and shouting, "Go, Grandma, go." And slowly, Mary's legs grew stronger, her heart steadier, her spirit braver. Then came the charity race day. Mary showed up at the school track in her simple running clothes, her white hair tied back. People whispered. Some smiled kindly. Others laughed behind her back. But Mary kept her head high. When the race began, something magical happened. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for Lily, for every older person told they couldn't, for every dream abandoned because of age. Her legs carried her forward, faster and faster, until the finish line came into sight. And that's when the shocking moment happened. Mary crossed the finish line first. The crowd went wild. Phones recorded. Children chanted her name. Reporters surrounded her. But then, as the celebration reached its loudest point, Mary suddenly clutched her chest and fell to the ground. Gasps filled the air. Lily screamed, "Grandma," and rushed toward her. The stadium froze. The crowd gasped as Mary, a 72-year-old grandma, sprinted past the finish line, her silver hair flying behind her like a banner of victory. The stadium shook with cheers, phones flashed, and the announcer shouted in disbelief, Unbelievable. She has done it. At 72 years old, she has broken the record. Everyone had said she was too old. They laughed when she first signed up, shaking their heads as if she was foolish. Some even whispered cruel things. She'll collapse before the race even starts. What is she thinking, embarrassing herself like this? But now, as she raised her wrinkled hands high into the air, tears in her eyes, Mary proved them all wrong. The judges rushed to confirm the record, while a reporter shoved a microphone toward her, yelling, "Mary, how did you do it? At your age, nobody expected this." But before she could answer, something happened, something that no one in the stadium could have ever imagined. And that is where her story really begins. Mary had not always been this strong. In fact, just a year before this day, she was sitting alone in her small kitchen, staring at her weak hands as they trembled over a teacup. Her life seemed quiet, almost too quiet. The days felt the same: morning tea, a little gardening, and sometimes staring out of the window at children playing on the street. Deep inside, she felt forgotten. Her children were busy with their own lives, and her friends were either too sick or too far away. One evening, her granddaughter Lily came to visit. Lily was a bright 12-year-old girl, full of energy. She hugged Mary tightly and said, "Grandma, our school is holding a charity race next month. Parents and grandparents can join too. Will you come and run with me?" Mary smiled sadly. "Oh, darling, I'm too old for running now. My knees would laugh at me if I tried." But Lily's eyes sparkled. "Grandma, you always tell me never to give up. You say we can do anything if we try. Are you giving up now?" The words cut deep. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Lily's voice. "Are you giving up now?" She thought of her younger days, when she used to be the fastest runner in her school. She remembered how alive she felt when her feet hit the ground and the wind rushed past her face. Could she do it again? Or was everyone right? Was she really too old? The next morning, she made a decision. She put on her old sneakers, laced them up slowly, and stepped outside. Her legs trembled, but she whispered to herself, "One step at a time." She jogged down the street, her neighbors staring at her with raised eyebrows. By the time she got home, her heart was racing, her chest hurt, and sweat poured down her forehead. She collapsed onto a chair, exhausted. But instead of feeling defeated, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Days turned into weeks. Mary trained every morning. She started slow, walking, then jogging, then running. Some neighbors mocked her. One man laughed and said, "Mrs. Mary, are you training for the Olympics? Don't break your bones before Christmas." Others shook their heads in disbelief. But there were also moments of encouragement. Lily cheered her on every weekend, clapping and shouting, "Go, Grandma, go." And slowly, Mary's legs grew stronger, her heart steadier, her spirit braver. Then came the charity race day. Mary showed up at the school track in her simple running clothes, her white hair tied back. People whispered. Some smiled kindly. Others laughed behind her back. But Mary kept her head high. When the race began, something magical happened. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for Lily, for every older person told they couldn't, for every dream abandoned because of age. Her legs carried her forward, faster and faster, until the finish line came into sight. And that's when the shocking moment happened. Mary crossed the finish line first. The crowd went wild. Phones recorded. Children chanted her name. Reporters surrounded her. But then, as the celebration reached its loudest point, Mary suddenly clutched her chest and fell to the ground. Gasps filled the air. Lily screamed, "Grandma," and rushed toward her. The stadium froze. The sound of sneakers slapping the track echoed in Mary's ears as she ran, but all she could hear was her own heartbeat. The man's body had just collapsed in front of her, his arm twitching weakly as his face turned pale. The world seemed to freeze. Mary's legs trembled, her mind spinning in chaos. She had trained for months, suffered through aching knees, nights of doubt, and cruel laughter from neighbors just to reach this moment. The finish line wasn't just a ribbon in the distance. It was her chance to prove once and for all that age was nothing but a number. But now, a fellow runner was lying on the ground, gasping for breath. The officials were still too far away. She was the closest. She had only seconds to decide. Her eyes flickered to the crowd. Some were shouting for her to keep going. Others pointed at the fallen man. And then she saw Lily, pressing against the railings, her little face red with panic. "Grandma, help him." Mary's decision was made in an instant. She skidded to a stop, dropping to her knees beside the man. His eyes fluttered half open, pain etched across his face. "Stay with me," Mary cried, gripping his hand. "Don't you dare give up." The crowd gasped. The cameras zoomed in. This wasn't the story anyone expected, the old woman who stopped running to save someone else. Mary pressed her hand against his chest, speaking in a firm voice. "Breathe. You hear me? Breathe." At last, 2 medics reached them, kneeling quickly. "We've got him," one said, sliding an oxygen mask over the man's face. He coughed weakly, but his chest began to rise more steadily. The medic turned to Mary. "Thank you, ma'am. Without you, he didn't finish the sentence." Mary closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of relief. Then she stood slowly, her legs stiff. Most of the runners were far ahead now. The chance of her winning had slipped away. But when she looked up, she didn't see disappointment in the crowd's eyes. She saw something greater, respect. The stadium was on its feet, clapping and cheering louder than before. And above all the noise, one voice cut through like music. "Lily's. That's my grandma," she screamed, tears of pride streaming down her face. Mary felt a fire ignite inside her again. She turned back to the track. The race wasn't over. She might not come first, but she wouldn't come last either, not if she still had breath in her body. She started running again. Every step hurt, her muscles burning, but she refused to stop. Her heart pounded, sweat trickled into her eyes, yet her spirit soared higher with each stride. The crowd chanted her name now. "Mary! Mary! Mary!" By the time she reached the final lap, her chest felt like it was tearing apart. Her vision blurred. She could hardly breathe, but she saw the finish line ahead, glowing under the stadium lights like a doorway to destiny. With one last burst of strength, she crossed it. The sound was deafening. The entire stadium roared. People held up their phones, tears streamed down faces, children jumped and cheered. Mary staggered forward, then dropped to her knees, overwhelmed with relief and exhaustion. Reporters swarmed her. One woman thrust a microphone forward. "Mary, you didn't come first, but the world just saw your courage. How does it feel to be the real winner today?" Mary took a deep breath, her voice shaky but proud. "I didn't win the medal, but I won something greater. I proved that kindness matters more than trophies and that it's never too late to keep going." The crowd erupted in even louder cheers. But just as she stood to leave the track with Lily, a tall man in a black suit appeared at the edge of the field. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling. His eyes were cold, sharp, studying her every move. He walked toward her slowly, cutting through the crowd like a shadow. Mary stiffened, her hand instinctively tightening around Lily's. The man leaned close, his voice low and serious. "Mrs. Mary, what you did today was extraordinary. But this," he gestured to the track, "this is only the beginning. If you truly want to inspire the world, there's a greater challenge waiting. A dangerous one." Before Mary could speak, he slipped a small card into her palm and disappeared back into the crowd. Mary looked down at the card. Her hands shook as she read the bold letters printed across it. World Senior Championship, invitation only. Her heart pounded. She had never even heard of such a thing. Beside her, Lily tugged her arm. "Grandma, who was that man?" Mary had no answer. But deep inside, she knew her journey wasn't over. It was only getting harder. Mary sat at her kitchen table that night, staring at the black card in her hand. The words burned into her mind. World Senior Championship, invitation only. She had never heard of such a thing. Was it real? Or some cruel trick? Lily sat across from her, chin resting on her palms, watching her grandma closely. Grandma, are you going to call them? Mary sighed, running her finger across the edge of the card. I don't know, sweetheart. I've already pushed my body farther than I ever thought possible. What if this championship is something even harder? Lily leaned forward, her eyes glowing with determination. But Grandma, you always tell me to be brave. What if this is your chance to show the whole world that you're unstoppable? Mary smiled faintly. Lily was right. Somewhere deep inside her, the fire still burned. The race had changed her, not just her body, but her spirit. She wasn't the same woman who once sat in silence, staring at her teacup, feeling forgotten. With trembling hands, she dialed the number written on the back of the card. A man's voice answered almost immediately. Mrs. Mary, we've been expecting your call. Mary froze. Who are you? What is this championship? There was a pause before the man spoke again, his tone calm but heavy. It's not advertised. It's not televised. Only a few are chosen each year. Seniors from around the world, tested in ways you cannot imagine. It is not just about speed or strength. It is about heart, will, and sacrifice. Mary swallowed hard. Why me? Because, the voice replied, the world saw you stop to help a man today. That moment made you different. You're not just a runner, Mrs. Mary. You're a fighter. And we need fighters. Mary's hand shook as she held the phone. She could feel Lily's eyes on her, waiting. Finally, she whispered, what happens if I say yes? The man's answer was simple. Then prepare yourself. Because once you accept, there is no turning back. The line went dead. That night, Mary lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was at war. She knew she was no longer young. Her body wasn't built for endless battles. Yet something inside her screamed that this was her destiny, that she had been given one last chance to live a life of meaning, not silence. By morning, she made her choice. 2 weeks later, Mary found herself on a bus headed to a remote training camp outside the city. Lily insisted on coming along, her excitement bubbling over. Grandma, this is like a secret mission. You're going to be a superhero. Mary chuckled, though her stomach twisted with nerves. I don't know about superhero, but it certainly feels like something big. When they arrived, Mary couldn't believe her eyes. The camp was filled with people her age and older. Some were in their 60s, some in their 70s, even a few in their 80s. Yet they were stretching, lifting weights, running obstacle courses. Their faces were weathered but determined. A tall woman in her late 60s approached Mary with a firm handshake. Name's Margaret. Used to be a firefighter. Thought I was done until this place. Mary blinked. So it's real? Margaret nodded. More real than you think. This isn't just about sports. This is about showing the world that strength doesn't die with age. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. Days at the camp were grueling. From sunrise to sunset, the seniors trained, running, climbing, balancing, even swimming across freezing waters. Mary's body screamed in protest, but every time she thought she couldn't go on, Lily's voice echoed in her heart. Don't give up, Grandma. Slowly, she grew stronger. Her lungs filled with fire, her legs carried her farther than before, and her heart beat with determination she didn't know she still had. But the competition was fierce. Some of the seniors were unbelievably skilled. One man named Victor, tall and broad-shouldered, ran like he was 30 years younger. He glanced at Mary during training and smirked. You won't last long here, Grandma. Mary raised her chin. We'll see. The tension grew. Some days, Mary felt powerful, outrunning others in practice drills. Other days, she barely managed to finish, collapsing into bed with aching bones. The highs and lows tested her spirit more than anything ever had. Finally, the announcement came. The first official trial of the World Senior Championship would begin the next morning. The seniors gathered in a large hall, their faces tense. An official in a black suit stepped forward. Tomorrow, you will face your first challenge. Only half of you will continue. The rest will go home. Gasps filled the room. Mary's heart dropped. She had fought so hard to get here. Could she really survive this? That night, she sat by the campfire, staring into the flames. Lily wrapped her arms around her grandmother's shoulders and whispered, "You can do this, Grandma. I believe in you." Mary smiled weakly. "Then I'll try my best. For you." The next morning came. The seniors were led outside to a massive obstacle course filled with walls, ropes, mud pits, and fire hoops. It looked more like a battlefield than a race. The official raised his hand. "Your trial begins now." The seniors surged forward, the crowd roaring with excitement. Mary's heart raced as she leapt into action. She climbed the first wall, pushed through the mud, and fought her way forward. Her breath came in gasps, her muscles screamed. But she kept moving. Halfway through, she slipped, crashing hard into the mud. Her knees burned with pain. Gasps rippled through the crowd. For a moment, Mary couldn't move. She thought it was over. But then she heard it, Lily's voice above the noise. "Don't stop, Grandma. Get up." Mary clenched her fists, her eyes blazing with fire. With a roar that silenced the crowd, she pushed herself to her feet and kept running. But just as she neared the final obstacle, something shocking happened. Victor, the strongest competitor, slipped from a rope and fell hard. He lay on the ground, unmoving. The officials didn't move. The seniors hesitated. All eyes turned to Mary. Would she stop again to help, or keep going and finally win her place? Victor's body hit the ground with a sickening thud. The strongest man in the camp, the one everyone thought would dominate the championship, was lying motionless at the base of the rope climb. The other seniors froze, staring in shock. The officials remained still, their arms crossed. No whistle, no medics rushing in. It was as though they were testing something, watching to see what the competitors would do. Mary's heart pounded. Her body screamed for rest, mud dripping down her arms and knees, but her eyes were fixed on Victor. He had mocked her, laughed at her, told her she wouldn't last. Yet now he was helpless. The finish line loomed just ahead. For the first time, Mary could truly win. This was her chance. The world would see her as not only brave, but victorious. All she had to do was keep running. Her legs shifted forward instinctively. But then she heard a voice, so faint it nearly broke her heart. Victor's lips moved, whispering, "Help me." Mary froze. Memories flooded her mind. The charity race, the man who collapsed, the decision she made to stop. That choice had cost her victory, but it had also made her who she was. Lily's voice pierced through the chaos. "Grandma, do what's right." Mary clenched her fists. Then, without another thought, she turned away from the finish line and rushed to Victor's side. She dropped to her knees in the dirt. "Stay with me," she said firmly, pressing her hand to his chest. "Breathe, Victor. Don't you quit on me." Victor's chest rose weakly. His eyes fluttered open. For the first time, the arrogant smirk was gone. He looked at her with gratitude. Why would you stop for me?" Mary smiled softly, even through her exhaustion. "Because winning means nothing if you forget what it means to be human." Gasps echoed through the stands. The officials finally signaled for medics, who rushed forward and lifted Victor onto a stretcher. Mary stood slowly, her body trembling, her face covered in mud and sweat. She turned back toward the finish line. She was the last one still standing on the course. With every ounce of strength left in her, she stumbled forward. Her knees wobbled, her chest burned, but she refused to stop. Step by step, she reached the final wall. Her fingers clawed at the rough surface, her arms screaming in pain. Slowly, painfully, she pulled herself up, inch by inch, until finally, she threw herself over and tumbled down the other side. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. She crossed the finish line last, but the roar of the people was louder than it had ever been. The officials gathered the competitors together. One of them, the same man in the black suit, stepped forward. His voice was steady, powerful. "Today we saw strength. We saw speed. But above all, we saw heart. And that is what this championship is truly about. He turned to Mary. You, Mrs. Mary, have proven that true champions are not measured by medals, but by courage. You did not come first. But you have won something far greater. You have won the spirit of this competition. The seniors around her clapped. Even those who had doubted her now looked at her with respect. Victor, still weak but conscious on a stretcher, raised his hand and whispered, "Thank you." Mary's eyes filled with tears. She turned to Lily, who ran into her arms, hugging her tightly. But before she could even breathe, the man in the black suit raised his hand again. His voice cut through the cheers. This was only the first trial. Tomorrow, the true championship begins. And only the strongest in spirit will survive. The crowd fell silent. Mary's heart stopped. That night, Mary sat on the edge of her bed in the camp dormitory, her body aching in every muscle. She had survived the obstacle course, but her mind kept circling back to the words of the man in the black suit. Tomorrow, the true championship begins. Lily sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. Grandma, you don't have to do this anymore. You already proved them wrong. Mary smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. Sweetheart, it's not about proving them wrong anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can keep going, no matter what comes. The next morning, the seniors were gathered in the main arena. The crowd was twice as big, the cameras brighter, the energy electric. Instead of a course, a huge stage had been built in the center. The man in black spoke again, his voice echoing across the stadium. The true championship is not about climbing, running, or strength. It is about resilience of the heart. He raised his hand, and a large screen lit up behind him. Clips of Mary played, her climbing the muddy wall, pulling herself over, helping Victor. The crowd watched in awe as her story unfolded before their eyes. This, he said, pointing at the screen, is the spirit we are looking for. And today, we honor the one competitor who carried it all. Mary froze. The spotlight turned toward her. The stadium erupted with cheers. People stood on their feet, clapping and shouting her name. Mary! 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 Tears welled in her eyes. She stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding louder than the roar of the crowd. She had not expected this. She thought she was walking into another battle, another test of her body. But this was different. The official smiled. You may not have finished first in time, but you finished first in courage. And that is what true victory means. A golden medal was placed around her neck. The weight of it felt heavy, not because of the medal, but because of everything she had gone through to earn it. Victor, still bandaged but strong enough to stand, walked onto the stage. He extended his hand. I mocked you. I laughed at you.
But you saved me.
And you've taught me something no trophy ever could. Mary took his hand, and the crowd cheered louder. Then Lily ran up, tears streaming down her cheeks, and hugged her grandmother tightly. Grandma, you're my hero. Mary held her close, whispering softly, No, darling. I'm just proof that you're never too old to dream, and never too weak to fight for what matters. The stadium lights shone brightly, the crowd still chanting her name. Mary lifted her medal high, not as a symbol of beating others, but as proof that the heart never grows old. And in that moment, the world learned a lesson it would never forget. Age is not a limit. It's only a number. Courage is what truly keeps us alive. The crowd's cheers rose into the sky like thunder, and Mary stood tall, smiling through her tears, knowing she had not only proven them wrong, she had inspired everyone watching to believe in themselves again. And that was her greatest victory. Thomas's fingers trembled as he held the photograph. The image was worn, the edges curled, but it was clear. Grandma Eleanor, much younger, cradled a baby in her arms. Her smile was wide, but her eyes carried a sadness that none of them had ever noticed in her before. This isn't us, Thomas whispered, his voice hoarse. This baby, this isn't me. Or you. Or Linda. Richard snatched the photo from his hand, studying it under the weak kitchen light. His chest rose and fell quickly. Who is this? Who the hell is this child? Linda stood frozen, her hands pressed to her lips. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. No, no, this can't be happening. Not after everything. Not after losing her. Why would she keep this from us? The lawyer cleared his throat nervously, his voice barely steady. This could change the entire inheritance. If another heir exists. Shut up about inheritance. Thomas snapped, his voice echoing off the walls. This isn't about money anymore. This is about who we are. About who she really was. Margaret reached out slowly, her expression sorrowful. I told you. Eleanor had secrets. That photograph, it proves she carried her burden to the grave. But now it's time you knew the truth. Richard spun on her, his face red with fury. You keep saying that, but you haven't told us anything concrete. If you know something, then say it. Margaret's lips trembled. She opened her mouth to speak, when suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the broken kitchen window. Heavy, deliberate steps crunching over fallen leaves. Everyone turned to look. A shadow moved just beyond the glass. Then, a hand, large and calloused, gripped the window frame. Slowly, a man climbed through the shattered window, stepping into the kitchen with eerie calm. Linda let out a scream. The lawyer stumbled back, nearly tripping over himself. Richard balled his fists, ready to attack. Thomas raised the candle holder again, his knuckles white. The man was tall, with a face weathered by years, his clothes plain and dusty, as though he had traveled a long way. His piercing eyes scanned the room, then fell on the photograph in Thomas's hand. That's me, he said quietly. The room went silent. Thomas's grip loosened, the photo nearly slipping from his hand. What did you just say? The man stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with weight. That baby. In the photograph. That's me. Richard shook his head violently.
No.
No, this is insane. Who are you? The man's gaze hardened. My name is Michael, and Eleanor was my mother. The words hit like a thunderclap. Linda's knees buckled, and she grabbed the counter to keep herself standing. Richard's jaw dropped, for once completely speechless. Thomas staggered back, the photo now shaking in his hand. Margaret closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. So, you finally came. Michael's eyes flicked toward her. You knew this day would come. The siblings erupted at once. What are you talking about? Richard shouted. How can this be true? Linda cried. Thomas shook his head, his voice breaking. Are you saying we had another brother? Michael's voice was steady, but there was bitterness in it. Not had. Have. I am your brother. Eleanor gave birth to me before she married your father. But I was taken away, hidden. Because she was ashamed. Because the world back then would not forgive her for having a child out of wedlock. The air grew thick with disbelief. Richard slammed his fist on the table, his temper exploding. Lies. All of this is lies. If you're telling the truth, why didn't she ever mention you? Why did she hide you? Michael's face darkened. Because she was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. Afraid you would hate her. So she raised you three as though I never existed. And she left me to grow up without a mother. Linda sobbed, her hands shaking. No, she loved us. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't cruel. Margaret finally spoke, her voice breaking. He's telling the truth. Eleanor told me everything. She made me promise not to reveal him until after her death. She wanted the truth to surface, but only when it could no longer destroy her. The lawyer, pale and trembling, rubbed his temples. This changes everything, the will, the estate, the inheritance. Thomas silenced him with a glare. Stop talking about money. Do you not understand? Our whole lives, our whole family has been built on a lie. Richard shook his head furiously. I don't believe it. I won't believe it. He lunged at Michael, grabbing him by the collar. You think you can just walk in here and steal everything? Michael didn't fight back. He just looked Richard dead in the eye and said, "I don't want your money. I want the truth. I want to know why she chose to love you and not me." Richard froze. His grip loosened. The words stung like fire. For a moment, no one spoke. The room felt like it was suffocating them. Then Margaret reached for the envelope on the table. She pulled out the rest of the letter and unfolded it slowly. Her voice shook as she read aloud. "To my children, Richard, Linda, Thomas, and Michael. Yes, Michael. For too long, I kept you apart, and for that, I beg forgiveness. You were all my children, but my fear was stronger than my courage. I thought I was protecting you, but in truth, I was protecting myself. If you are all reading this together, then fate has given you one last chance. Do not let anger destroy you as it once destroyed me and my sister. Do not fight over what I leave behind. Instead, fight for each other." Margaret stopped, her voice breaking. The words hung heavy in the air. Richard stared at the letter, his face pale. Linda sobbed uncontrollably, her tears falling onto the table. Thomas looked at Michael, his heart torn in two. And then, from the hallway, another sound broke the silence, this time the unmistakable creak of the front door opening. Someone else had just entered the house. The storm outside had calmed, but inside the old house, the air was still thick with tension. The letter had ended, but the story it carried was far from over. Richard sat quietly, staring at the floor. For the first time in years, his voice was low, almost unsure. "So what now? Do we just forget everything? Pretend this never happened?" "No," Thomas said firmly, shaking his head. "We can't just forget. We need to live by what she asked of us." But Linda's eyes darted to Michael, and her voice cracked. "It's easy for you to say that, Thomas. You weren't the one lied to your whole life. We were. About Dad, about Michael, about everything." Michael's chest tightened. The sting of rejection was still there, though softer than before. He tried to steady his voice. "I didn't ask for this either. Do you think I wanted to be hidden? To be kept in the shadows?" Linda's lips quivered. "I know, but it still hurts. It feels like everything we knew about our family was a lie." Edward stepped forward, his voice weak but firm. "Children, I failed you all. But Eleanor was right. Love is the only thing that matters now. You can let this truth divide you, or you can let it heal you." The siblings fell silent. The candle flickered in the dim room, shadows dancing across their faces. And then, out of nowhere, a loud bang echoed through the house. Everyone jumped. "What was that?" Linda gasped, clutching her chest. Richard grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the hall. "It came from the study." Margaret frowned. "No one has gone in there since Eleanor passed." Thomas stood, his fists tight. "Then maybe it's time we do." They moved carefully toward the study, their footsteps creaking against the floorboards. The air grew colder as they neared the old wooden door. Richard turned the handle slowly, and the door groaned open. The room smelled of dust and paper. Books lined the shelves, and the curtains were drawn tight. But what caught their attention was the desk in the center, its drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. Linda gasped. "Someone's been here." Michael knelt and picked up one of the papers. His eyes widened. "These aren't just papers. They're deeds. Property deeds. Grandma owned more land than she ever told anyone." The siblings looked at one another, shock flashing across their faces. Richard's voice grew tense again. "So, she was even richer than we thought." Thomas clenched his jaw. "Richard, don't you dare go back to that." But before the argument could grow, Michael held up another piece of paper. His voice shook. "No, you don't understand. These deeds, they're not in her name. They're in ours." "What?" Linda whispered, stepping closer. Michael spread the papers on the desk. Each one bore a sibling's name: Richard, Linda, Thomas, even his own. Eleanor had already divided her hidden wealth among them. Margaret's hand covered her mouth. She planned this all along. The siblings' hearts pounded. And then, as if the air itself was holding its breath, Edward spoke in a broken whisper. She wanted peace. She wanted fairness. And yet, he paused, his face darkening. If someone else knew about these deeds, then Eleanor's secret wasn't as safe as she thought. The siblings stiffened. What do you mean? Thomas asked. Edward's eyes hardened. I mean someone else has been here. Someone else is looking for what she left behind. And if they found these papers before us. The candle flickered violently, as if the house itself shivered. Then this family isn't done with secrets. Or danger. The siblings stared at one another, their stomachs twisting with fear. Because if Grandma Eleanor had hidden so much from them, who else had she hidden it from? And who else might come looking? The room fell silent once more, the weight of a new mystery pressing down on them. And then, suddenly, footsteps echoed again in the hallway. Louder, closer. This time, none of them spoke. They only listened. The footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate, as though whoever it was wanted them to hear. Linda clutched Thomas's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Richard's eyes darted toward the door, sweat glistening on his forehead. Michael's breath quickened, his fists tightening at his sides. Who's there? Thomas shouted, his voice steady but strained. Silence. Only the creak of the old floorboards answered. Richard grabbed a heavy brass candle holder from the desk, his knuckles white. I swear, if this is one of you playing games. It's not a game, Edward interrupted sharply. His face was pale, but his eyes were hard. Stay together. The siblings edged closer, their hearts racing as the footsteps grew louder, closer, until suddenly, they stopped, right outside the study door. Everyone froze. The handle turned, slowly. Then, with a sharp click, the door creaked open. A tall figure stepped into the room, wrapped in a long coat, the brim of a hat shadowing his face. For a moment, no one breathed. Who are you? Thomas demanded. The stranger's voice was low, almost calm. I could ask you the same thing. Richard raised the candle holder like a weapon. Answer the question. The stranger smirked and reached into his coat. Linda gasped, thinking he might draw a weapon, but instead, he pulled out a folded envelope. He tossed it onto the desk, and it slid across the papers. Michael picked it up with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the handwriting, and his heart nearly stopped. It's Grandma's writing. The room spun with shock. The stranger spoke again, his voice steady. She trusted me to deliver it, but only if things turned ugly. Linda's voice cracked. Ugly? What are you talking about? Who are you? The man finally lifted his head, revealing sharp features, graying hair, and eyes filled with something unreadable. My name is Harold. I was Eleanor's lawyer. And her friend. The siblings exchanged stunned looks. You mean you knew about all of this? Richard asked. Harold gave a slight nod. I knew more than you think. But she made me swear to keep her secrets until the time was right. He glanced at the scattered deeds on the desk. Looks like the time came sooner than expected. Thomas frowned, his arms crossed. And why didn't she tell us herself? Harold's eyes softened, and for the first time, his voice cracked. Because she was afraid. Afraid you'd let greed destroy you. Afraid you'd never forgive her past. Afraid you'd forget what mattered most. His words cut deep, and silence filled the room again. Michael's hands trembled as he unfolded the envelope. Inside was another letter, written in Grandma Eleanor's delicate handwriting. His voice broke as he read aloud. Tears streamed down Linda's cheeks. Richard's grip on the candle holder loosened, and it clattered to the floor. But before anyone could speak, Harold's tone grew dark. That's not all. There's something you need to know. Everyone's heads turned. Harold stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Eleanor suspected someone else was watching her. Someone who wanted her land, her money, her secrets. She told me to be careful. And judging by the state of this room, he pointed to the rifle drawers. That person may already be closer than you think. The siblings' hearts raced. Linda whispered, You mean someone broke in? Harold nodded grimly. Yes. And if they didn't find what they wanted, they'll be back. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of the storm beginning again outside. Suddenly, a crash echoed from downstairs. The front door had been thrown open. Wind howled through the hallway. And then footsteps. Heavy, fast, coming straight toward them. The siblings froze in terror. Richard whispered, his voice trembling. "This time it's not Harold." The footsteps thundered up the stairs, closer and closer, until the whole house seemed to shake with their force. Linda clutched Michael's arm, trembling. Richard grabbed the fallen candle holder again, ready to swing. Thomas positioned himself near the door, his jaw set. Edward took a step forward, his hand clenched tightly into a fist. Harold stood tall, his eyes narrowed, as though he had been expecting this moment all along. The study door burst open. A man stumbled into the room, his clothes wet from the rain, his eyes wild with desperation. His face was familiar, too familiar. Michael gasped. "Uncle David?" The room froze. David, their mother's estranged brother. The one Grandma Eleanor had rarely spoken of. The one who had disappeared years ago after a bitter argument with the family. His chest heaved as he glared at them, his voice rough. "So, it's true, she left it all to you." Linda shook her head in disbelief. "Uncle David, what are you doing here?" He sneered, stepping closer. "What do you think? That land, those deeds, they should have been mine. She owed me. After everything she took from me, after the years I spent alone while she poured her love into you. And now you sit here, fighting over scraps, while I get nothing?" Richard's grip tightened on the candle holder. "You don't deserve anything. You abandoned her." David's face twisted with rage. "Abandoned her?"
No. She abandoned me.
She chose pride over family, secrets over truth. His voice cracked, and for a moment, the anger faded into sorrow. "She never forgave me, and I never forgave her." The storm outside howled louder, lightning flashing through the windows, illuminating the pain in David's eyes. Harold stepped forward, his voice steady. "David, Eleanor spoke of you before she passed.
She didn't hate you.
She pitted the anger that consumed you. And she left behind something for you, too." David's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Harold reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. The handwriting was the same, Grandma's delicate, looping script. He held it out. "She knew you might come back one day." With shaking hands, David snatched the letter and tore it open. His eyes moved across the page, his lips trembling as he read. The letter slipped from David's trembling fingers. He fell to his knees, his face buried in his hands, sobs shaking his body. The siblings watched in stunned silence. Michael knelt beside him, his own eyes wet. "Uncle David, she still loved you. She never forgot you. None of us should forget what she wanted, for us to forgive, to stay together, to protect what she left behind." For the first time in years, the bitterness in David's eyes seemed to fade. His shoulders slumped, and he whispered, "I don't deserve her forgiveness." Linda's voice was soft but firm. "None of us deserve her. But she gave us her love anyway." Richard slowly lowered the candle holder, his anger melting into grief. Thomas's fists unclenched, and he sighed deeply. Edward stepped forward, putting a hand on David's shoulder. Harold looked around the room, his expression heavy but hopeful. "Eleanor didn't just leave you land. She left you a chance.
A chance to be a family again.
Don't waste it." The storm outside began to calm, the rain softening, as though the house itself was breathing again. The siblings gathered around the desk, the letters and the deeds, no longer as enemies, but as children of the same woman who had tried so hard to keep them together. David wiped his tears, his voice shaking. "If she could forgive me, maybe I can forgive myself. And maybe we can start again." For the first time that night, the siblings nodded, not in anger or resentment, but in unity. Together, they packed the letters back into the box, placing it gently in the center of the table. It was no longer about who got what or how much each one deserved. It was about honoring the woman who had loved them all, even in their worst moments. As dawn broke, soft light poured into the study, chasing away the shadows. The storm had ended, and with it, the war over Grandma's will. They left the house arm in arm, broken but healing, carrying with them the final lesson Eleanor had given. Family is not about what you inherit. It's about what you choose to protect, together.